Okay, we are on filmsgonewild.com. We are going to talk about the film Monuments. We have Jack Newell and Angie Gaffney with us. Welcome to Films Gone Wild.
Hi there.
All right.
Hello.
Okay, now we start this off with you guys having to do the organ grinder monkey thing of explaining the movie yet again to the audience folks that are tuning in that have not had a chance to see Monuments yet. So Jack, why don't you tell us what Monuments is about?
Oof, I just did it. I was going to send it over to Angie, but I'll do it. Fine.
You got it.
I'll do my best. I'm Jack. I'm the writer-director of the film, and the Monuments is about a guy named Ted who loses his wife Laura tragically, unexpectedly, and goes on a road trip to try to come to terms with what to do with her loss and where to finally scatter her ashes.
All right. Here's what I really enjoyed about the film was the tone, because it's such a distinctive tone that's carried throughout this film that goes from whimsical to melancholy it doesn't quite veer into with our little needle to hilarious to tragic. It keeps in that middle ground, which is incredibly difficult to do, and you guys did it. And so I really want you to talk about that, both script wise and also directing wise. So let's start off with that, Jack, and discuss that.
Sure. Well, it's Jonathan, your video's frozen. I want to make sure you're still there.
Yes. Yeah, we're still there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think you sort of analyzed it great. I mean, that's sort of what we were going for, was that sort of bopping back and forth between those different areas. And I think the tone was sort of tricky, and I think it took a lot of development. Angie and I came to Angie with the script. We worked it for a year or so and got some feedback to try to see, are we hitting this area? The simple answer of why is because, none of this is that. Film a lot of the times is reductionist, and it just wants to make a comedy, a tragedy, and I think this is a comedy for sure. I mean, it is that, but it can be more than just simple, this is, everything's hilarious, there is no, and then there's that one scene where it's oh, here's the heart with this one scene, and then back to hilarity. That's just sort of just not what we wanted to do with this project, I think. And so we were able to sort of bounce back and forth because it felt more organic and more true to life. And the whole movie is about, his relationship at the top of the film is unsettled. They're in a moment of flux, and then she gets taken away from him before that can get solved. And so this is the opportunity to sort of come to terms with it. And so that flux that we feel, I feel like all of us living in the world we live in now with COVID and everything going on, it's we are living this movie in a lot of ways, where it's there's great stuff and there's terrible stuff, and it's all sort of intermingled. I think just trying to play in that space and then allow all the actors and the collaborators on this to play in that space and as well was sort of what we were trying to do.
Well, one thing I was also thinking as I was watching it, because there's also a quirky character thing, and I was thinking, to its credit, I kept thinking of the work of Del Shores, as I was watching, and I was going, in the best ways, it was reminding me of his plays and his films, and so I want to talk about casting. And Angie, I want to bring you in because you when you guys are going through the casting process, and it's not always just centering on someone that just knocks it out of the park during audition, but you're also thinking of chemistry between characters, and because it works so well in this film. So let's talk about casting. Let's start with Marguerite. I've been a huge fan of hers for the longest time, and so much and she's so important, obviously, to this film, because we don't even have a trip, so to speak, if we don't have the right person there. So start with her.
Yeah. So throughout the entire casting process, we were fortunate to work with Brittany Ward, who's a great casting director. She's based here in Chicago. And to your point about tone, it's really tricky, right? Because we wanted the cast to be able to reflect the breadth of emotion that the film itself portrays and the tone portrays, while still being super grounded in reality. And with Marguerite's character, Laura, we were specifically looking for someone that could bring a ghost to life effectively for most of the movie in like a really grounded human way. You know, we didn't put any like special effects. We didn't make her ghost-like or translucent or anything. So it was this balance of like kind of this heightened character with a very like human heart and a very grounded script. And she was critical to help us, to your point, kind of find that balance in that tone and make sure that the needle didn't go too far in any one direction. And then David Sullivan, who plays Ted, I think his performance is, I mean, he's great, he's incredible, and it's so earnest and so authentic and so heartfelt that level of sincerity, especially in contrast with these heightened moments or heightened characters, like Howell, played by Javier Munoz. I think that level of like sincerity really, really drives the whole casting process. And you know, it was really fun. Like, it was a really fun casting process because you have these crazy characters in these crazy moments that are a bit fantastical. And Chicago has a breadth of incredible local talent. So to be able even to go through the audition process and see all this talent have their take on like crazy Amber or whoever else it may be, it was a really cool process.
Well, I mean, yeah, and even to the extent of, you know, the little bit that like Joel Murray does, where, you know, even there where you go, you know, there is such a balance of, okay, he's got to be the authoritarian guy, but just light enough to keep us on the right keel. And of course, he, you know, I mean, you know, he could, you know, read. He said that classic thing. He could read something from the phone book, and you know, and he's awesome.
Yeah.
But even that, I think is crucial. Now, the last thing I wanted to get with, to have you guys talk about is, again, because we're talking about such a critical, fine-tuned thing that you're aiming for tonality wise, when you're in that editing process, oftentimes, you know, you look at that assembly cut and you go, oh, fuck it. What happened? Because we you know, every scene we shot was right what we wanted, but what happened? And, you know, and you have those crises of confidence and what have you. So I would love for both of you to discuss the editing process and really, again, zeroing in on what Jack was aiming for when he, you know, as he was fine tuning the script.
I mean, I'll share two stories. One is to your previous comment that you said, like, it feels like Del Shores. And I remember when I watched the first, because the way I work is that the editor gets the first pass without me in the room, sort of, just to see, like, what are you seeing? And I remember I saw the first cut of the film and I was like, wow, this movie is really quirky and idiosyncratic, which is sort of sounds insane that's when I realized it. But it was like, sorry, there's a siren outside. I was struck in that moment was like, okay, wow, this is a very, and then to the other thing you just mentioned, I remember we started the movie with editing and David, the editor, moved into my house for a couple months. Which I still can't believe we did that, but
I can't either.
He stayed in his room, which is now the office. But then near the end, he was like, I need to go back home and see my girlfriend and, like, you know, water my plants, you know. And so the very end of the film, we finished in LA and we did it at Technicolor out in LA. And so I was going back and forth to LA a bunch. And the final trip out, when the end of the trip was going to be picture lock, I flew the entire flight. This is not to be overly dramatic or anything. I stared out the window. I didn't listen to music. It was this, like, the weirdest, I've never had this experience before. I was like, just going out the window. I think that we planned in, so now to get more specific to your question, like we actually planned in reshoots and pickups into the budgeting and into the whole thing, which not a lot of independent films do. So that did help with some of the stuff. Most of that is like basically in transitionary things to help with flow and pacing. We didn't really reshoot any scenes, and we only really picked up just stuff to help with that. I think in the editing process, one thing that I do a lot, and that Angie and I did on this film, is we had a lot of test screenings. And so we tested it to audiences, I mean, a lot. Right?
A lot. Yes, a lot. Yeah, and I think, can I jump in, Jack?
Yeah, that was me setting you up.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, that was a transition. That was a smooth transition.
smooth. I think, right, you tell the story, you write the story 3 times, like script, production, and in the edit. And I think a lot of the tone that you're speaking to was fine-tuned in the editing process. I remember when I first watched the assembly cut, which is the cut that it follows the script exactly. I was like, well, we're gonna screw around with this. We're gonna play around with this one and see what happens. So it was really cool. And I think I have to give Jack and David credit for working so hard and like living together during this process because the amount of not only test screenings, but also like testing different ideas, playing, because we're in such a heightened sense of reality. I think the editing process was almost that much more, I don't want to say complicated, but dynamic. And so like testing different ideas, testing different structural changes, testing, cutting out or putting in scenes in order to fine tune that tone. It was an exciting, but it was a long process. And I give a lot of credit to David and to Jack for being there throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I remember when Stephanie watched the final version, Stephanie, our DP, she was like, the script that we shot, so there was a movie that we talked about, this is similar to Angie saying, but like when we were prepping the movie, we always talked about making this movie. And then I wrote the script and we worked the script, and that was like this movie, the film we ended up making actually was this one. So it was weird because in the script, if you read the script, it didn't work in a lot of ways, I would say, but it does work when it was finally made, which is sort of always the case with film, but this one was a sort of more extreme example. I remember late in the writing process, I realized like this movie's probably going to be non-linear and we're probably going to jump time with flashbacks. And then also made the choice that like shooting a script that is non-linear with those continuity is a nightmare. So it's like, don't do that. Just keep the script as is. But I sort of always knew heading into the edit that we were going to be jumbling time. But that was interesting because that was, I think, the first thing. Like David Sullivan, who plays Ted, said he only saw the script like a month or so before we shot it. It was linear, and then when I showed it to him, he was like, "What is this? It works," but he was sort of thrown for a loop. And I think that was a huge part of the discovery process in the edit. And that actually, to your question about tone, that sort of goes to that as well, because how you choose what scenes to put next to each other. It's all, I mean, I essentially just defined filmmaking right there, but that's what it's all about. It's like, how is the audience going to be emotionally ready to learn that? Because we make a joke when they're at the thrift store about how she died. And that's about halfway through the film. That joke is my favorite joke in the whole movie. It wasn't even written, where she's like telling the story and then we cut away and you hear her, like that was sort of improvised. She sort of made that up on set. But how do I get the audience to laugh at that? They need to have already been sad that she died, and they're sad that and they also need to know, then they need to care about those characters. So it's like, how do you sequence those events in a way that works so the audience can go on the journey you want to take them on? And that's the discovery process, I think.
Well, again, like I said, I enjoyed it supremely, and I'm a huge fan of 70s cinema, and I'm a huge fan of those films. Like I just recently watched An Unmarried Woman, the Mazursky film, and those films, I think, do linger with us. And to both your credit, you know, I would see Monuments as a film that will linger with an audience, and it's precisely for those reasons. You know, because again, it's not just setting them up and knocking them down with gags, you know, or a very predictable, you know, delivery system as far as you know, reward at the end, you know, kind of thing. Again, you know, there is an ebb and flow to it that I think, you know, kind of gets under your skin a little bit, in a very enjoyable way.
That's rad, man. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and that is like legitimately what we're going for, like perfectly. Like that's really wonderful to hear.
Well, fantastic. Well, again, the film is Monuments, screening at the Lake County Film Festival. We've been talking with Jack Newell and Angie Gaffney. It's been great to talk to you guys about movies.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you. This was great.